You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And as always, we're your hosts for this show. And thanks for being with us on this later start. Unfortunately, we had an event, so we couldn't get on right at 8 o'clock, but we're happy that you guys are able to join us at a later time. We thought about pre-recording the show, but then we decided, you know what? It's a little bit more engaging and it's more fun when we can do it live. So here we are. We're live right now. So it looks like Dave Filoni is actually speaking out about this whole Ahsoka thing. There is an episode that was cut together, and he's describing this thing as basically some sort of a religious experience or something. Other quotes have him saying that he's in awe of the thing, right? So, I mean, I guess this is a good sign considering this is the guy that created the character. You know, this is the one that he created the character. He's the one that pretty much brought her into live action when they did The Mandalorian. And, I mean, this is a really, really good sign. But then, and this is where the discussion, I think, is really going to land tonight. There's a flip side to that, though. Because it could be that he's just enamored with seeing his own creation come to the screen and be in its own show. And, you know, it might be the case of he's so close to the character and so close to the project that he really can't be objective.
Yeah, I mean, number one, I mean, you know, you got to think about it from this standpoint. You know, no one, you know, is going to say like, the show looks all right. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
No one's going to say.
Truthfully, it's a little mediocre. I'd say it's somewhere between like Obi-Wan and Book of Boba, you know, I mean, right.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, no one's going to say that. Of course, they're always going to, you know, reap high praises. So,
sure.
Not taking anything away from that, though. Ahsoka is a very cool character. You know, it's a character that definitely has grown on a lot of people, yourself included. And, you know, it's really cool to see this character come to the live screen. We've already seen it in, you know, the Mandalorian series, Book of Boba Fett. And so now, you know, she's getting her own show. And unfortunately, it's not Ashley Eckstein playing the character, but Rosario Dawson. I mean, we've always said, like, if there was anybody who should play her.
Yes.
And that's exactly who they got. So, you know, that's always a positive. Now, on to the article and, you know, subsequently the story.
Yeah, because this is interesting. I have to admit, I mean, I know you're about to like really get into this thing, but I thought that of some of the different ideas that were floating around, I thought it was interesting that you chose this one to wrap an entire show around. So,
yeah, I mean, you know,
granted, it's newsworthy. Don't get me wrong, but it's one of those things that, you know, sometimes, because obviously it's a discussion-based show and we want to know what the audience thinks and all that too, but usually a lot of times, either one of us, there have been times where, you know, we'll do something that's newsworthy or something, right? Something that's at the forefront of what everybody's talking about. But then there's other times where there are particular articles or whatever that come up that we're like, wow, I really want to talk about this. I've done that, you know, to where it's like, well, here's a bunch of stuff. And, you know, sometimes we'll ask each other, well, okay, we got 3 great topics we can talk about. Which one should we do? Like, which one can you really have a really concrete, passionate discussion about? And that's a lot of times how we'll choose. And I remember you brought this one this morning, I think, actually. So, I mean, there's always something to talk about on this stuff, but I'm curious on what it was about this particular story that really resonated with you, that made you go, yeah, man, I want to talk about this.
Well, I mean, you know, we often talk about a lot of the missteps of Star Wars, things that they have done wrong, things that they could have done better. But I do want to focus on the positives, and I think Ahsoka is a positive character. Dave Filoni positive creator. And I guess I just want to hear from people, like one, because, of course we could talk about Andor, but that's forthcoming anyway. I mean, the closer we get to September, there's going to be more chatter about, what that show is going to be.
Well, not to mention the fact that we've kind of done Andor. We've focused
Pretty
on that for the
heavily.
last few shows
Yeah,
pretty heavily, yeah.
exactly. And so I kind of wanted to kind of, steer us into a different direction with another character. And Ahsoka Tano, this is a character who we've watched grow. If you're a fan of the Clone Wars animated series, if you haven't seen it, I highly suggest you watch it. She pops up again in Rebels, more mature, more wise, even more powerful. And I think that this is a good point because you know we're on the precipice of Mandalorian season 3 coming out, and this show is supposed to kind of take place like right after that series wraps up, not like immediately, but probably somewhere around there. Much like how we just got done with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then now we're getting Andor like right here in September, so we won't have to wait long. But Dave Filoni is, once again, for those who don't know, he's the heir apparent to George Lucas. He's his Padawan protege, whatever you want to call him. But he has pretty much, along with the assistance of Jon Favreau, they've really kind of created a lot of good Star Wars content. And so this is one of the things that we've all been kind of clamoring for, is to see a Filoni based show in live action, because he's done great with animation. We've always known him as an animator or a person in that world, but now we've always wanted to kind of see him do, hey, what if Filoni did a movie? And now we're just getting this TV show, or this series, I should say. I won't say TV show, but series, Ahsoka. Now, he says it's a religious experience. Now, like you said, you made a very valid point. He could just be like, this is his baby, his project, his character that he created. So he could be really excited about that. But you also have to kind of wonder too, the story of this, where is it going to go? Because we have this whole world once again that we have to build again. With Kenobi, we kind of know, what his whole story is, in regards to his journey, right? But Mandalorian, that's what was so refreshing about that particular series, because it was a character we've never seen before, and it's like, okay, well, hey, set the world up for us, right? Well, this is a character that, for those of you who are engaged in the Clone Wars and Rebels, this character, but there's been a significant amount of time since we have seen this character, and there's a lot of things that this particular character can answer, can connect with, and there's a lot of questions. Where was she doing the original trilogy? We have this whole thing with Thrawn now that was brought up in the Mandalorian season 2, and so even in her interview when she was at was it D23, they asked her, or it could have been Celebration.
I think it was Celebration.
They asked her, I think it was Celebration. Yeah, they asked her, a lot of different questions. And one of the main questions, like, okay, Thrawn, right? And of course, she can't really reveal that.
Yeah.
But we know that's got to be like the central point of her series, because she made mention of it in season 2. And so for them to say, okay, well, this is going to be a whole religious experience, I'm really kind of, at the first cut of this. And, Rosario Dawson, she's talked very favorably and highly about this series. She's a pretty well-versed Star Wars fan.
Mm-hmm.
She knows a lot of different things about the lore, and I wouldn't call her a super fan. I don't know, but it's one of those things that I'm kind of excited to see what this character can bring now that she's all grown up.
Well, and that's a big significant point that you just bring up too, right? Is the fact that where she's at in life, she's I mean, she was actually older and wiser even in Rebels. You know, that was one of the things that was, and I remember when Ashley Eckstein was voicing her, she even said, you know, one of the challenges of this was I actually had to try to get into the mindset of an older Ahsoka and what that would be like in the differences. And what I found hilarious was after her doing that on Rebels for a while, and they decided to do season 7 of the Clone Wars, it was like, well, now she had to turn around and actually try to get back into voicing the younger version of Ahsoka, and what would that be like? And so now you bring up a really good point where it's like, look, we're way beyond that now, right? We're past the original trilogy. We're probably a good, 8 to 10 years past where we last saw her in Rebels. So what is that going to be like? What is that experience like? How is she different? We see glimpses of it, particularly, oddly enough, in the Book of Boba Fett, where you had all those scenes with her and Luke, and of course her and the Mandalorian, Din Djarin. So I really think that it's a fascinating thing, not only where she's at, but you also have to remember, and this is why I bring up the whole emotional content with Dave Filoni about it coloring him or his opinion, because he's looking at this through almost like these rose-colored glasses, like we would say. Because don't forget, it's not just Ahsoka. The Ghost, Sabine, probably Hera are all going to be in this show. And so now you're almost talking, and of course Ezra is probably going to be in it as well. So you're basically talking about a live-action version of Rebels, which was the first show that Filoni created on his own. As everybody forgets, that even though Filoni kind of took up the mantle on the Clone Wars, it was Lucas's creation. And Filoni was basically playing in Lucas's sandbox. He was more or less, working within the framework of everything that Lucas was creating, and he had final say and all that. Except for maybe season 7, because that was done after Lucas sold Lucasfilm. I try to say that a lot of times. All these Lucases, right? But there are a lot of instances where I think Filoni is now really proving himself, and he's coming into his own. He has a bunch of series under his belt. He has some live-action directing experience. So I think the danger, again, I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade here. I just think that we do have to, it would be irresponsible if we didn't take into consideration the fact that this being akin to a religious experience to him is because he is seeing this whole show, not just Ahsoka, but at least Sabine, probably Hera, more than likely Ezra. He's the one also that brought Thrawn into any kind of new canon as well. So he could take a little bit of ownership of that character too. And now he's seeing all this in live action. I don't necessarily know how much is in the first episode. But judging by that trailer that they showed at Celebration, that I was actually going to have us review or look at, but whatever. After what happened to us with the Mandalorian Season 3 leak, and it was kind of like the same thing. I watched the Ahsoka trailer, and it was the same kind of deal. It was somebody shot, the thing on their phone or something like that, and basically put it up. Now, what I find interesting, just a little editor side note here. I don't understand why our show was flagged, where we were commenting on the thing, but yet the actual footage wasn't. Because keep in mind, when we reviewed it, I got it off of YouTube. It wasn't like I loaded it in or did something like that. I mean, it was a YouTube video. Excuse me. Go figure, right?
Yeah, I mean, what... Yeah, it is one of those funny things sometimes with, social media.
It was a little bit of a digression, I admit. But I mean, I was tying in the fact that I really wish in a lot of ways that we could have dealt with the leaked trailer for Ahsoka, or that maybe they would just release the trailer for Ahsoka. Although it did look a little almost unfinished, but Still, man, I mean, it was a pretty stunning thing, I have to admit. Like, seeing the ghost in actual live action was cool. Seeing Sabine was cool. There's actually a lot of stuff that I could point to that was really, really cool to see, even though it was probably in an early stage. But at the same time, I just wonder, when I think of what it did for me, just having followed that show all these years, imagine being the one that created it and seeing it. So I just wonder, and I guess that maybe, you can chime in on this, but exactly where do you think reality lands for this? I mean, do you think that Filoni's being objective or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about Filoni is that I think he has, and we've talked about this on numerous occasions, that he gets Star Wars. Number one, he understands the framework, and he even so much explained it to us all, in a Disney Plus series called The Gallery, where he pretty much outlined what Star Wars actually is. It's not just the lightsabers of TIE fighters and all that stuff, but what it really is, what it represents. The blueprint of Star Wars he gets. So I think he's always looking at it objectively. I mean, he's been named the creative director, of Star Wars. Now,
I know I keep forgetting that.
And it's
I mean, so, I don't know why I keep forgetting about that, but you're right. I mean, he was, whatever that means.
So yeah, so it stands to reason that like he gets it, you know what I mean? And so, and like I said, we've seen the success of The Mandalorian and shows like that. So here's my thing. I think that this particular character, and you brought up something that was key, and that's Thrawn. And we've done a show, Thrawn is the key to Star Wars, right? Because you don't have Palpatine to lean on. We don't have Darth Vader to lean on anymore. So now it's like, okay, if you're going to propose a new threat within that same framework, Thrawn is the best option. And especially he's already been established in canon with the books, with him being in Rebels, and I think a lot of people really kind of like, if you did know about Thrawn, you kind of fell in love with him watching Rebels. And those who did watch Rebels, who already knew about Thrawn, I mean, yes, he wasn't exactly the way he was in the expanded universe, but he was really good, though. You got to give it that.
He was pretty close too. I mean,
it was pretty close.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're going to have, is that like now we're going to have a new frontier in Star Wars with this particular show. That's why I'm so excited. And I think that's why Filoni probably is saying what he's saying as far as it being a religious experience, because he already knows how this is going to play out. But to see it actually starting to come and take form and shape exactly the way he intended it, that's a positive.
Well, here's another thing to look at too. Mm-hmm. Well, I was just thinking that not only do you have this new frontier and everything, as you basically said, but when you actually, first of all, we don't really know how long this first episode is.
I mean, we really don't know a whole lot. We do know that, this is scheduled to be released in 2023.
Yeah.
And that's really about it. We don't know how many episodes we're going to get.
That's true.
We don't know how many seasons is planning on going. And we don't know how long each episode is going to be. Or
there's a lot we don't know.
Yeah, it's a lot we don't know about Ahsoka.
Well, and what I'm getting at with that, though, is that we don't know how long the episode is. So maybe there's more meat on that bone. If it's a longer episode, if it's closer to an hour, then I can understand Filoni's reaction. And again, this is assuming that he's being objective. This is assuming, look, I'm not being colored by, the way I feel about the character or the way I feel about bringing Rebels characters into live action. I'm not, if he's really honestly looking at this objectively, and I would like to think that is possible simply because of some of the other stuff that he's done, and it turned out really well. And then as far as Thrawn goes, I mean, you and I have said, in fact, we did an entire show recently on the
Hmm.
future of the entire franchise being in the hands of Thrawn.
Right.
Because, and this is precisely the point that you just brought up, is exactly what we were talking about. Because you have a situation where you have a villain who can essentially be the Palpatine of a new well, at least until Palpatine shows back up again and for episode 9. But, I mean,
Right.
in this chunk of time, though, you can actually have Thrawn be the main villain, and it opens up all of this story. It opens up a plethora of different characters that you can bring in and out. There's just a lot of areas they can go. I bring up the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy of books that
Hmm.
recently came out. And all 3 books have been released. The first one's called Chaos Rising. And then they released 2 subsequent books, which of course I haven't read yet. Still trying to get through Shadows of the Sith, actually. Which is really good, but I won't get off on that one not today anyway. But yeah, it's just, there's a lot that could be introduced in this series. This series could actually be the kickoff to that. And you also brought up a good point too, is that we don't know how many seasons this is going to be. We don't know how long in the future this thing's going to go. I mean, the reality is we don't even know that about The Mandalorian either.
Well, yeah, and the cool thing about what I feel about the Ahsoka series, why I'm kind of pumped up for it, is one, like we said, Thrawn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just since we already kind of talking about him, let's kind of hang out here real quick. So for those people who may not be familiar, Thrawn is a very unique character, and it's somebody that we haven't really seen in the Star Wars universe per se, like as far as a villain kind of like that, because we're so used to seeing the main bad guys being Sith lords. Thrawn is not a Sith. He doesn't even have the Force. Well, he doesn't use the Force, I should say. So you have someone like Palpatine, who we often talked about him being such a mastermind. He's such a manipulator. He's just brilliant at what he does as far as orchestrating all this chaos to create the whole war in itself, right? Of course, we all love Vader because he's the big powerful enforcer. He comes in, he's kind of almost like no nonsense, and he just has that gravitas.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have somebody like Thrawn. All right, Grand Admiral Thrawn is a military admiral, but what makes him so formidable is that he has unconventional ways of getting to his target, and he circumvents a lot of the typical ways of doing that, but he studies his prey, basically. And he studies the things that most people wouldn't look at. He studies their art and their culture, and he finds your weak points in such a way that you don't even see it coming. And he's playing chess with you, even though he's a chess. See what I did there? But
Oh man.
so he kind of sets you up, and he allows you to believe. He kind of sucks you in. He
Mm-hmm.
allows you to kind of think they're like, okay, you've got the upper hand, because he allowed you to get a couple of victories over him. And he's calm. He doesn't get upset. He's not really the tyrannical kind of. He's just very calm and calculated. And then before you know it, he's waiting on you to make that one critical error, and he's got you. And that's really, a cool thing to see against somebody like an Ahsoka Tano, who has the ability to use the Force in ways that gives her an advantage. So that's what's really cool. But then the other part about this is really awesome, is that, like you said earlier, we're essentially getting a live version of Rebels. And if you haven't watched Rebels at first, it's like, okay, this, because you and I watched it, Eric, when we first started watching. I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
we
I
want to see what the
remember.
show's about.
Brand new animated series created
But
after
then
the whole Lucas thing.
but as we got into like season 2, season 3, there was a lot of depth and a lot of great storytelling that went on in Rebels. And so my thing is like, okay, if you can bring that type of stuff to an animated series, bring that to a live action, I'm sold. Just do what you did with Rebels. And it works. I mean, as far as we're talking about story wise.
Yeah. I mean, I just hope that the limitations aren't there. We got some chats. David Sumler Jr. says, sorry for the redundancy. They're turning Ahsoka into a real movie. So, depends on how you look at things. Not an actual theatrical release, although you never know these days. I mean, it's not unusual for them to, put together a couple episodes of something and put it in the theater. But it is actually a live action series.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes. I mean, Ahsoka, we already saw the live action version of her in both The Mandalorian Season 2 as well as The Book of Boba Fett, which we'll probably have to start calling Season 1 because I think there was some leaked poster art for a Book of Boba Fett Season 2. So, and actually, it was The Book of Boba Fett where we saw the most of her, I think. She was interacting with Luke Skywalker. She was interacting with Din. She was, she had a lot of stuff. And then, of course, just referring to some of the other stuff that we were talking about, he's like, yes, Palpatine, the greatest of all time. And then, of course, Vader is the baby greatest of all time. Baby goat.
The baby goat.
The baby goat. So, yeah, I mean, I just think that there's a lot they could do. With Thrawn, he's kind of also used to call him the Sherlock Holmes of the whole Star Wars universe, which is definitely true because he always does seem to have a Watson. In the expanded universe, it was Captain Paleon. He was the one that was kind of the Watson to Thrawn's Holmes. And now in the newer canon, it's Eli Vantos. He's more the Watson to his Holmes. But when you actually factor in that kind of skill, deductive reasoning, all that stuff, along with his fighting skills, it would probably be more apt to say he's the Batman of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, he's very much so kind of like a, I guess if you want to call it like a evil version of Batman in a way, just without all the gadgets and stuff, but just his methodology and his way he goes about doing things is very Batman-like.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this so engaging for me. This is what makes and we still haven't even touched on Ezra, his growth, his development. Like I said, if you've watched Rebels, you see there's a lot of great stories. That's where we got the world between worlds. We got a lot of different things, understanding about the Force, the Bendu that was in Rebels. So and the Bendu is basically a life form that kind of hangs out between light and dark. He's not either or, he's in the middle. And so that's, a great thing. I don't know if we're going to see one of those in Star Wars. I mean, in Ahsoka, but that would be cool too. I mean, but like I said, Ahsoka has so many experiences being the Padawan of Vader. We got to see her explore that as far as feeling how, it was to go up against her former master as a Sith Lord. How did she survive? There's so many questions that we have that I think that will be that great connective tissue to a lot of different things, because now we can say that, like, all right, well, you were definitely in the prequels. You were right there before the original trilogy started. You kind of disappeared during the original trilogy. So what were you doing all that time? I guess I'm assuming you were looking for Thrawn and Ezra. And then on the backside of that now, it's like, okay, you've encountered Luke Skywalker, Grogu, all these different things. So now I really wanted to see, like, okay, with this whole landscape that she's been a part of, what does that look like, in her own series?
Well, and here's the thing too. There's a lot of things. First of all, besides not knowing how long it's going to be and where it's going to go, we don't know, even within the series, where is this mostly going to take place?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, we really don't know. If she's looking for Thrawn or whatever, it's like, well, is it going to take place on multiple planets? Is it going to be centralized into maybe like a Coruscant or something? You know, I mean, we don't even know the scope of how many planets are going to be visited, just where this story is essentially going to be taking place. But I will say this, and then I'll let you weigh in on this, and then we have some chats from Voyager. I'm beginning to think, and of course I thought this before, even with the Clone Wars, and I would actually include the Clone Wars in on this, but I'm really starting to strongly suggest here, guys, before Ahsoka premieres, you're gonna want to watch Rebels. And I wasn't really saying that as much at first, but the more that I look at it, I mean, you have to. Because not only is Ahsoka being brought into live action, but you actually have a situation to where the Ghost is coming in. You're going to have Sabine. You know, you're going to have all these people who are basically from Rebels and kind of, even though I didn't really say it that way, you rightly brought out that essentially what I was saying is that this is going to be more or less a live action version of Rebels. So I would say, I don't know.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, I'm sure you agree, but, you know, I would say that, and I would actually include the Clone Wars in on this too, especially when you get into like season 7 and stuff like that, because you're getting more into Ahsoka's backstory a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get, so Voyager says, Ahsoka spent most of her youth as a general. Of course, he corrected that, and he meant soldier. As a soldier for a feudal war, then a rebel leader for a fight she lost. It'd be interesting to see her try and develop her own identity now. And yeah, so it's essentially talking about how, you know, Voyager's rightly pointing out that, you know, she basically spent most of her youth as a Jedi, keeping the peace and eventually fighting in this war between the separatists and all that. And this is the kind of thing that I'm really liking about a lot of these live action shows that are coming out, is that they're starting to frame things. With Andor, we're going to see a little bit of that effect of the separatists versus a Republic war. And, you know, we just think in terms of, oh, it was Palpatine's big deception. It was the cloak that he used to gain ultimate power and start the Empire. But one of the things that we sometimes forget about these things, and Andor in particular is going to bring this out, is, look, there's actual consequences to all the people. The Bad Batch, which is basically the latest animated series. And I know Filoni's coming out with that Tales of the Jedi or something like that. But
yeah.
But basically, the latest that we have, and it's coming up on a season 2, is the Bad Batch. You know, that deals a little bit with the aftermath of what happened. And so you fast forward a little bit in time. Yeah, you know, Ahsoka basically just knew her whole life as, okay, I'm fighting for this war. These people basically abandoned me and accused me wrongly of this crime. You know, spoiler alert here. I'm basically going through some of the plot points of season 4 of the Clone Wars. But, you know, and then of course, with season 5 and everything, it's like, you know what? She's cleared and they offer her job back, basically. And she's like, nope, I'm out. And then, of course, what happens? She becomes Fulcrum and all this stuff in Rebels. And, I mean, like you said, there's just so much good storytelling, particularly in Rebels. And I just personally think that normally I say, you know, you don't really need to watch some of this stuff in order to understand. And I'm sure that's going to hold true. I'm sure they're going to do this in such a way where if all you did was watch Ahsoka, you would understand what was going on. However, I think, and it seems like you agree, more than ever, you want to talk about enriching and really enriching the whole experience. I don't know. I'm just thinking seeing Rebels is almost mandatory before watching Ahsoka.
Well, I mean, I would even say you have to watch the Clone Wars and then Rebels because you have to see the growth and development. I mean, when she went from being this annoying little girl who would, follow around Anakin, and calling him Sky Guy and all this type of stuff, and
R2.
kind of yeah, and kind of getting on, some Star Wars fans' nerves. Who should remain nameless.
Me, I'll cop to it. I have no problems with it.
So, you have that, right? But then there was a shift, though.
Yeah.
And then you start to see the maturation of the character, and now you're starting to look at her like, okay, man, like you're seeing how she grows up, the situation she's been put in to allow her to grow. And then now she starts to understand like the world and the bigger picture. And that was really cool. And so then by the time you get to Rebels and you see how far she has grown, because even the whole thing, like, I mean, honestly, it was a beautiful moment where, was it season 7 of Clone Wars when Anakin walks her into the hangar bay and all the clone troopers like painted their helmets with her facial tattoos that, just still honoring and recognizing her for who she was. Like, that was just a really, really cool moment. And so once again, even moving past that to Rebels and watching how she becomes Fulcrum, how she ends up, finding out that Vader is her, former master, and then confronting Vader and then surviving that. Like this woman has really
and
gone
again,
through a lot.
I mean, yes, obviously, and I even brought that up earlier. If you really want the full Ahsoka experience, because look, the show is called Ahsoka. It's not called Rebels. It's not a live action version of Rebels. It's called Ahsoka. It's going to focus on Ahsoka, even though a lot of these other elements are being brought in. So, yes, without question, if you really want the full enriching experience, you really need to watch Clone Wars and Rebels. And look, this isn't the first time we said this about anything. I mean, it's getting to the point where Clone Wars and Rebels is the foundation upon which all of this new canon material is being built. And I'm not just talking about some comic series or a book. I mean, a lot of these shows that we're seeing. And again, you can understand them within the context of each individual show and how they're connecting to some of the other ones. But in order to really gain the full experience and to understand, you just need to watch these. But even more so with Ahsoka, because like you said, we chronicle her from her very beginnings as an eager to please and just, reckless Padawan to become the wiser, calmer, leader that she becomes. And again, I mean, I can't stress this enough, is that my point is that, okay, look, if you don't have the time to go through 7 seasons of the Clone Wars, followed by 4 seasons of Rebels, seeing Rebels will probably give you enough of the basic context. I mean, granted, Ahsoka doesn't come in, I don't think, until like season 3 or something, or 2. Somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think 2.
Maybe 2.
Well, Fulcrum, because it's Fulcrum, but she doesn't. I don't think she's revealed until 3, though.
Well, but it's because Fulcrum was actually. I mean, I hate to give you spoilers, but if people haven't, it's not really. Well, all right, I'll refrain. There was the other Fulcrum though for a while that she took over from.
True.
So, it had to give time because this person was not the obvious choice to be the Fulcrum. And by the way, if everybody is out there, I'm just waiting for the comments or the chats to go, what's a Fulcrum?
Right. It's when you
I don't even know what that
no.
is. It's exactly.
It's geometry.
Right. Yes, exactly. You never heard of a fulcrum triangle? But
yeah.
Basically, it's kind of like an undercover spy or something, like a contact, a mole within the Empire.
Yeah, that was just the code name. Was
yeah,
Fulcrum.
and I mean, Isn't a fulcrum, if I'm not mistaken, kind of like it's like a leverage for like a lever or
Yeah.
something? It's like a fulcrum is like the pivot point or something like that.
Yeah.
I remember something like that. And
A
I
fulcrum
guess
is basically like when you take a piece of board and it's on a rock and you slide it under something and
slide
use
it
it to
under
gain
and yeah,
leverage.
use it to gain the leverage. Exactly.
Leverage.
So it,
Yeah.
you know, there is that. And of course, you know, David basically says math is the devil.
I agree.
Yes.
It is the Antichrist.
But it does come in handy sometimes. It's just always good to have somebody who really understands it better than us.
Exactly.
But fortunately for us, it's not a math show. It's a Star Wars show.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's basically the case. And I think that honestly, if you watch Rebels, it'll enrich enough that it would probably inspire you then to go back to Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
What do you think about Filoni? Like, as far as the stories that we're going to possibly get from this?
Well, I mean, I honestly think that a lot of this show is going to be an excuse to start to answer some of the questions that we got in the epilogue of Rebels, right? Where it made a point, because that was kind of a weird instance. It made a point to show us where all these people were after Return of the Jedi. That was a really bizarre move. And I thought, even when I saw it, I was like, why is he doing this? Like, they didn't do this with Clone Wars. You know, well, I guess they probably kind of didn't have to, because the original trilogy really was a continuation of that. But Filoni made it a point at the end of Rebels, final episode, final season, they did like a little epilogue, and they showed, essentially, after the second Death Star fell and all that, where these people were at that time period. And it's really interesting to me because I was like, what's he planning? So naturally, we all thought that, well, there must be some series coming. And then everybody was hoping for a continuation of Rebels. They didn't necessarily think there was going to be like a Rebels season 5 at some point. But they thought that maybe what ended up being this Tales of the Jedi show or whatever it is, I might be getting it confused. It's Tales of something.
No, you're right. Tales of the Jedi.
Is it? All right. Well, so basically, everybody thought that maybe he would come up with another series that followed the continuing adventures of the crew of the Ghost, which is essentially what are this. They're basically the central characters of Rebels. You know, it centers around these guys, and it branches out a little bit. And that's when you have Thrawn went off with Ezra. You know, Hera, I forgot what she was doing. It's, one of them had like a kid or something.
They were all looking for. I mean, that was the thing.
She had like Kanan's baby or something weird like that.
Yeah, and then but she eventually did try to join up and try to help with the search with Sabine and try to find Ezra.
Right, and that's kind of where we left off, and that's why we think that this is why Ahsoka is looking for Thrawn when she basically came up in The Mandalorian season 2 and was just kind of like, "Where's Thrawn?" And everybody lost their minds when she said that, because we all knew that meant we were going to get Thrawn in live action at some point. And we actually did a show, because I remember we said, okay, is he going to be in season 3 or whatever, The Mandalorian, or is he going to be in Ahsoka, or maybe both? And that's still on the table, but it's sounding like the sure money is on the Ahsoka series, obviously.
Definitely.
And a lot of that is due to the fact that, you know, Ezra and Thrawn went off together, and now she's looking for him.
Yeah. I think, like I said, I think this is, you know, I'm just giving my final thoughts on the whole matter, but I think
it is about that time.
This is going to be a really good show. I think that, you know, I'm really curious to see what Filoni's going to do as the center of this, as far as being like the creator of the character and the writer of these stories.
Yes.
And
because this will be the first live action show
yeah,
so far that he's done kind of on his own.
Exactly. And so that's what I'm most excited for. So let's see what this religious experience is about. I'm sure there's probably going to be a lot of, I mean, it's kind of funny that he used that term because, you know, the Jedi code is often looked at as a religion. So, and the fact that Ahsoka walked away from that, you know, it's like, okay, well, what awakening did she have? Because she's still using the Force. She's still fighting for what seems to be the good side of things. But time will tell.
All right, and kind of like you, I'm the same way. Look, I'm encouraged by Filoni's reaction to it. I'm still cautiously optimistic because I do think that his objectivity in this matter might be somewhat compromised. However, it is Dave Filoni, and I trust that he's going to bring us a really cool show. And of course, not to mention the fact that there's a lot we still don't know about it. But I do believe that this, you know, seeing this being like a religious experience, I think this is definitely an encouraging sign. I cannot wait to see where they go with some of these characters and what they end up doing, and also how it ties in with the other shows that take place during this current timeline, namely The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett. So I think that there's a lot to look forward to in this. And again, look, it comes out in 2023. You know we're going to cover a lot. When they release that first official trailer, of course we're going to do a reaction video to it. With all the Ahsoka news that'll come out, of course we're going to talk about it. When the show comes out, of course we're going to review it. So,
yes,
you guys, us, we're going to be on this Ahsoka journey together. You know, just like Andor's coming up pretty soon, we're going to have some stuff to talk about with that. So, yeah, overall, I think I can speak for both of us. We're looking forward to this show. But the question is, of course, what do you guys think? Look, if you haven't done so already, if you like this video, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you'll be notified. Normally, we're on every Monday and Friday at 8 o'clock. Of course, tonight was a little bit of an exception. And that's what happens. Look, if we get stuck, like we're working or, you know, there's something going on, we're either going to pre-record a show for you or we're going to come on live a little bit later. So hopefully that you guys can join us then. We don't really know what we're talking about Friday yet, do we?
Not yet.
All right. Well, while you guys are waiting for that, hey, look, we're part of the buymeacoffee.com program. There's a link in the description. You guys want to support us, help the channel grow a little bit, you can either make a one-time donation, you can support us monthly, and there's all these packages you guys can take advantage of. And I'm looking at actually creating like a Discord too. I was looking at that the other day because, you know, with these packages that we have too, I need a way of creating like a community within this community, you know, something that we can hop on that and talk and have special videos and stuff like that. So look, share this video. Tell as many of your friends as possible about this so we can have a really good discussion. We appreciate each and every one of you for joining us live every Monday and Friday. So with that, we'll see you guys Friday. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.